In a world filled with complex figures, few stand out as starkly as Ayatollah Khomeini. Known for his role in shaping Iran's political landscape, he wasn't always the infamous leader we know today. His early life holds clues to the man who would later become a symbol of revolution and tyranny. Born into a modest family in 1902, Khomeini's journey began in a small town where he faced the struggles and challenges of his environment. As he grew, the influences around him, from religious teachings to the socio-political climate of the time, began to mold his thoughts and ambitions. But what drove him to become the powerful figure he would later be? What events in his formative years triggered the transformation from a hopeful young man into a relentless leader who would change the course of history? It's February 1979, and the air is electric in Tehran as Khomeini returns from years of exile, greeted by an ecstatic crowd chanting his name. Their cries echo a longing for change, a fervent hope for liberation from the oppressive regime of the Shah. This moment was not merely a homecoming. It was the culmination of a revolution that would forever alter the course of Iran and reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. But how did this man, who began life in a modest town, rise to become a leader of such immense significance? Khomeini's journey from a small village to the forefront of Iranian politics is a tale of ambition, resilience, and unwavering conviction. Born in 1902 in Khomeini, Iran, he was steeped in the teachings of Islam from an early age. His intellectual pursuits led him to become a prominent cleric, respected for his deep understanding of Islamic jurisprudence and philosophy. However, it was his vocal opposition to the Shah's regime that propelled him into the national spotlight. Khomeini's denunciation of the Shah's policies, which he deemed un-Islamic and corrupt, resonated with a populace that felt marginalized and oppressed. He became the voice of the disenfranchised, articulating their frustrations and dreams for a just society. The significance of Khomeini's leadership during the Iranian Revolution cannot be overstated. His ability to unite various factions of Iranian society, from religious clerics to leftist activists, under a common cause was nothing short of remarkable. He emerged as a symbol of resistance, and his ideology of Islamic governance promised an alternative to Western-style democracy, which many Iranians viewed with suspicion. The revolution itself was a response to decades of political repression, social inequality, and cultural upheaval, and Khomeini's vision struck a chord with those yearning for change. As he famously stated, "Islam is not a religion of the past. It is a religion of the future." However, the transition from revolutionary leader to the supreme leader of Iran presented its own set of challenges and controversies. After the overthrow of the Shah, Khomeini faced the monumental task of building a new government while contending with internal dissent and external threats. The initial euphoria of the revolution soon gave way to fears of authoritarian rule, as Khomeini sought to consolidate power and impose strict interpretations of Islamic law. The creation of an Islamic Republic in 1979 marked a pivotal moment, yet it also raised questions about the balance between freedom and authority. Critics argue that Khomeini's regime became increasingly repressive, silencing dissent and stifling political pluralism. As we navigate through Khomeini's life, it becomes evident that his legacy is complex and multifaceted. On one hand, he is celebrated as a champion of anti-imperialism, a figure who defied the West and sought to reclaim Iranian sovereignty. On the other hand, he is criticized for the human rights abuses and oppression that characterized his rule. The duality of Khomeini's character prompts us to reflect on the nature of leadership and the sacrifices made in the name of ideology. Moreover, Khomeini's influence extends beyond Iran. His revolutionary ideology inspired Islamist movements across the globe, altering the dynamics of international relations. The ripple effects of his actions are felt even today, as countries grapple with the implications of political Islam and the challenges of governance in the modern world. As we examine his life, It's crucial to understand the historical context in which he operated and the societal forces that shaped his decisions. In contemplating Khomeini's life, we are invited to ponder profound questions about power, governance, and the human condition. Was he a visionary seeking to liberate his people, or was he ultimately driven by a desire for control? As we delve into this exploration of Ayatollah Khomeini's life, we not only uncover the events that defined a leader, but also reflect on the broader implications of his legacy for contemporary society. Early life and background. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini was born on September 24, 1902, in Khomeini, a small town in central Iran, to a family with a long lineage of Islamic scholars. His father, a prominent cleric, played a significant role in shaping Khomeini's early understanding of Islam and its principles. Growing up in a modest household, he was instilled with a deep respect for religious authority, learning about Islamic teachings and jurisprudence from an early age. The cultural and religious environment of Khomeini set the foundation for Khomeini's future, influencing his beliefs and shaping his perspectives on governance, justice, and social responsibility. Khomeini's early education was rooted in traditional Islamic studies. He began his formal education in a local school, where he learned reading, writing, and basic religious texts. His thirst for knowledge led him to study under various local scholars who recognized his potential and encouraged him to pursue advanced studies in theology. At the age of 15, Khomeini moved to the city of Qom, which was rapidly becoming the center of religious scholarship in Iran. There, he joined the prestigious seminaries, immersing himself in the works of eminent theologians and philosophers. During his years in Qom, Khomeini studied under several influential scholars, including Allama Tabatabai and Ayatollah Abdul Karim Hari. These mentors introduced him to advanced theological concepts, Islamic philosophy, and jurisprudence, deepening his understanding of the principles that would guide his future leadership. Khomeini's intellectual curiosity was matched by his dedication to his studies, and he quickly established himself as a respected student and thinker. His writings from this period reflect a blend of traditional Islamic thought and a growing awareness of the socio-political issues facing Iranian society. Khomeini's early life coincided with significant historical events in Iran. The Constitutional Revolution of 1905 to 1911 marked a pivotal moment in Iranian history, as it sought to limit the absolute power of the monarchy and establish a parliamentary system. This period of political upheaval inspired Khomeini, who observed the role of the clergy in advocating for reform and justice. The influence of these events resonated with him, instilling a belief that religious leaders should play an active role in political matters. Khomeini's engagement with these revolutionary ideas shaped his understanding of the relationship between Islam and governance, laying the groundwork for his later activism. As Khomeini progressed in his studies, he began to engage with contemporary political thought and the challenges facing Iranian society. The Qajar dynasty, which ruled Iran during Khomeini's formative years, was plagued by corruption, mismanagement, and foreign interference. The Shah's regime faced increasing discontent from various segments of society, including intellectuals, merchants, and the clergy. Khomeini's exposure to these social injustices fueled his desire for change and reinforced his belief in the necessity of a government rooted in Islamic principles. In the 1940s, Khomeini married and began to establish his own family life while continuing to build his reputation as a religious scholar. He had several children, and family life provided him with a deeper understanding of the challenges faced by ordinary Iranians. This period also marked a turning point in Khomeini's political engagement. He began to address the pressing issues of poverty, inequality, and the moral decay he perceived in Iranian society. His sermons and lectures emphasized the need for social justice, economic reform, and the restoration of Islamic values and governance. Khomeini's growing prominence as a religious leader coincided with the rise of the Pahlavi dynasty under Shah Muhammad Reza Pahlavi. The Shah's modernization policies, influenced by Western ideals, were met with resistance from traditionalist factions, including the clergy. Khomeini emerged as a vocal critic of the Shah's regime, condemning its secularization efforts and the perceived erosion of Islamic values. His opposition to the regime intensified after the 1953 coup d'état, which reinstated the Shah with the support of Western powers, particularly the United States. This event was a turning point for Khomeini, solidifying his belief that the clergy must play an active role in defending the interests of the Iranian people. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Khomeini's activism grew bolder. He began to mobilize opposition against the Shah, using his position as a religious authority to rally support from various segments of society, including students, workers, and intellectuals. His teachings resonated with a wide audience, as he articulated a vision of an Islamic state that prioritized social justice, anti-imperialism, and national sovereignty. Khomeini's lectures and writings became increasingly influential, spreading his ideas beyond the confines of Qom to a broader national audience. In 1962, Khomeini delivered a series of lectures that outlined his vision for an Islamic government, arguing for the establishment of a political system rooted in Islamic law, Sharia. He emphasized that governance should reflect the will of the people while adhering to Islamic principles. Khomeini's call for an Islamic state resonated with a population disillusioned by the Shah's authoritarian rule and increasing Western influence. His ideas gained traction among the burgeoning student movements and intellectual circles that were critical of the Shah's regime. Khomeini's opposition to the Shah reached a critical juncture in 1963 when he publicly condemned the government's policies, particularly its efforts to secularize education and reduce the clergy's influence in public life. This led to his arrest and subsequent exile to Turkey, where he would remain for over a year. During this time, Khomeini continued to write and communicate with his supporters, maintaining his leadership role despite his physical absence from Iran. His exile only heightened his stature as a symbol of resistance against the Shah's regime, with many viewing him as the legitimate leader of the opposition. In 1965, Khomeini was exiled to France, where he continued to articulate his vision for an Islamic revolution. His writings and speeches gained international attention as they highlighted the injustices faced by the Iranian people under the Shah's regime. Khomeini's ability to connect with ordinary Iranians through his rhetoric resonated deeply with a populace longing for change. His vision of an Islamic Republic that would prioritize justice, equality, and independence from foreign powers struck a chord with many who were disillusioned by the status quo. The culmination of Khomeini's early life and background was marked by a unique confluence of personal, political, and historical factors. His upbringing in a religious family, combined with his rigorous education and the socio-political climate of Iran, prepared him for the role he would later assume as the leader of the Iranian Revolution. Khomeini's understanding of Islam was not merely theological. It was deeply intertwined with his commitment to social justice and political engagement. His life's trajectory, characterized by a relentless pursuit of justice and a vision for an Islamic state, positioned him as a transformative figure in Iranian history. As the 1970s approached, Khomeini's influence continued to grow, culminating in the events that would lead to the Iranian Revolution of 1979. His early life experiences shaped his ideological framework, making him a powerful symbol of resistance against tyranny and oppression. Khomeini's journey from a small-town cleric to a revolutionary leader reflected the aspirations and struggles of millions of Iranians who sought a government that aligned with their values and beliefs. Rise to prominence of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's rise to prominence is a compelling narrative woven into the fabric of Iran's modern history, reflecting the confluence of religious fervor, political discontent, and social transformation. Born in 1902 in Khomian, a small town in central Iran, Khomeini hailed from a family deeply entrenched in Islamic scholarship. His father, a respected cleric, instilled in him the values of piety and religious duty, laying the foundation for Khomeini's later role as a spiritual and political leader. The early years of his life were marked by traditional Islamic education, which began at home and later expanded into formal studies at religious seminaries in Iraq, Qom, and Najaf, Iraq. His academic journey provided him with a profound understanding of Shia Islam, the philosophy of Islamic governance, and the socio-political issues of his time. Khomeini's education emphasized the significance of ethical values and social justice, which would later become integral to his ideology. He immersed himself in the works of influential Islamic scholars and philosophers, developing a critical perspective on the socio-political landscape of Iran. This period was characterized by the oppressive rule of Reza Shah Pahlavi, who sought to modernize Iran through a series of reforms known as the White Revolution. While these reforms aimed at westernizing Iran and promoting economic development, they significantly undermined the traditional power of the clergy and alienated many conservative segments of society. The Shah's secular policies and oppressive measures against dissent created a fertile ground for Khomeini's later opposition. As Khomeini entered adulthood, he began to engage with the political realities of his country. The late 1940s and early 1950s were marked by significant political upheaval, particularly the nationalization of the oil industry under Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. Khomeini's opposition to the Shah's regime solidified during this time, as he openly criticized the monarchy's alignment with Western powers, particularly the United States and Britain. His growing reputation as a religious leader and political dissenter was established through his eloquent sermons and writings, which highlighted the moral and ethical failures of the ruling elite. Khomeini's advocacy for social justice and his calls for political reform resonated with a wide audience, positioning him as a prominent voice against tyranny. The pivotal moment in Khomeini's rise came in the 1960s when he firmly opposed the Shah's modernization efforts. In 1963, after the announcement of the White Revolution, Khomeini delivered a powerful speech condemning the Shah's policies, particularly his attempts to undermine Islamic institutions and traditions. This speech led to Khomeini's immediate arrest, which triggered widespread protests across Iran. His imprisonment only intensified his popularity, and upon his release, Khomeini became a symbol of resistance against the Shah's oppressive regime. The government, recognizing the threat he posed, forced him into exile, first to Turkey and then to France. While in exile, Khomeini continued to communicate with his followers through a series of writings and recorded messages, which circulated widely within Iran. His ability to articulate the frustrations and aspirations of the Iranian people during this turbulent period was instrumental in solidifying his position as a leader of the opposition. The late 1970s witnessed a crescendo of discontent against the Shah's regime, culminating in the Iranian Revolution. As protests erupted throughout the country, Khomeini's messages resonated deeply with a diverse coalition of groups, including leftists, nationalists, and religious conservatives. His vision for an Islamic government based on the principles of Shia Islam attracted widespread support, transcending traditional ideological boundaries. Khomeini's ability to unite various factions under a common cause of resistance against tyranny was a remarkable feat, showcasing his political acumen and charisma. His slogan, "Independence, Freedom, Islamic Republic," encapsulated the aspirations of the Iranian people, and it became a rallying cry for demonstrators across the nation. The revolution gained momentum as mass protests and strikes paralyzed the country, culminating in the Shah's departure from Iran in January 1979. Khomeini's return from exile in February 1979 marked a defining moment in the revolution. His arrival in Tehran was met with euphoric celebrations, as millions flocked to welcome the man who had become synonymous with the struggle against tyranny. Khomeini's ascension to power was swift. He quickly established himself as the supreme leader of the new Islamic Republic, and his authority was enshrined in the new constitution, which incorporated the principle of Vilayat-e-Faqih, or the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. This principle became the cornerstone of Khomeini's political philosophy, asserting that Islamic scholars should guide the state in accordance with Islamic law. Khomeini's consolidation of power in the aftermath of the revolution was marked by a decisive crackdown on opposition groups. While the revolution initially promised broad-based participation and inclusivity, Khomeini's government swiftly moved to eliminate dissenting voices. The Revolutionary Guards were established to maintain order and enforce Islamic laws, and political factions that opposed Khomeini's vision were ruthlessly suppressed. The execution of political adversaries and the establishment of a theocratic regime sparked significant debate about the future of democracy in Iran. Khomeini's leadership style, characterized by charisma and an unwavering commitment to his vision, enabled him to navigate the complexities of post-revolutionary governance while maintaining popular support. The early years of the Islamic Republic were fraught with challenges, both domestically and internationally. Khomeini faced significant economic difficulties stemming from the upheaval of the revolution and the subsequent loss of oil revenues. Inflation soared and unemployment rose, leading to widespread discontent among the populace. The government implemented a series of economic reforms aimed at addressing these issues, but they often fell short of expectations. Khomeini's response to these challenges was to invoke Islamic principles, framing the economic hardships as a test of faith and resilience for the Iranian people. His ability to articulate a vision of an Islamic society grounded in justice and equality resonated with many, allowing him to maintain a degree of popular support despite the hardships. Khomeini's foreign policy was defined by a commitment to resisting Western influence, particularly that of the United States. His anti-imperialist rhetoric resonated deeply with the Iranian populace, and he positioned the United States as a primary adversary. The Iran hostage crisis, which began in November 1979 when Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, became a defining moment in U.S.-Iran relations. Khomeini's refusal to negotiate for the hostages cemented his image as a revolutionary leader, but also had lasting repercussions for Iran's international standing. The crisis led to economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation, significantly impacting Iran's ability to engage with the global community. Khomeini's steadfastness during the crisis further solidified his authority domestically, as many viewed him as a defender of national sovereignty. As the 1980s progressed, Khomeini faced a new challenge in the form of the Iran-Iraq War, which began in 1980 and lasted for 8 devastating years. The war was characterized by immense human suffering and economic strain, yet Khomeini's leadership during this period demonstrated resilience. He framed the conflict as a struggle against foreign aggression, positioning Iran as a defender of Islam against a hostile enemy. Khomeini's ability to rally the nation around a common cause contributed to a sense of unity and purpose during a time of crisis. The war also allowed Khomeini to further consolidate his power, as the need for national unity necessitated a strong central authority. Despite the immense challenges faced by his government, Khomeini's vision for an Islamic Republic remained steadfast. He continued to emphasize the importance of Islamic values in governance, advocating for social justice, ethical conduct, and resistance against tyranny. Khomeini's writings and speeches became increasingly influential, shaping the ideological framework of the Islamic Republic and guiding the actions of its leaders. His emphasis on vilayat-e-faqih underscored the notion that religious authority should play a central role in the governance of the state, ensuring that all policies aligned with Islamic principles. The latter part of Khomeini's life was marked by declining health and increased scrutiny of his leadership. In the late 1980s, his health deteriorated, and he faced criticism from within the regime as some factions began to question his policies and the direction of the Islamic Republic. Nevertheless, Khomeini's legacy remained influential, and he continued to exert considerable authority until his death in June 1989. His passing marked a significant turning point in Iranian history, as the nation mourned the loss of a leader who had become an enduring symbol of resistance and revolution. Khomeini's impact on Iran and the wider region is profound and lasting. His vision for an Islamic state has influenced generations of political leaders and movements across the Middle East, shaping the trajectory of contemporary Islamic thought. Khomeini's legacy is multifaceted, encompassing both the triumphs and failures of the Islamic Republic. While he successfully united disparate groups against a common enemy and established a theocratic regime, the challenges of governance and the complexities of modernity have continued to test the ideals he espoused. The leadership of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini during the Iranian Revolution and its aftermath was pivotal in reshaping not only Iran, but also the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and beyond. Khomeini's rise to prominence was marked by a series of significant events and conflicts that defined his leadership and the trajectory of the Islamic Republic. To fully grasp the complexity of Khomeini's impact, it is essential to explore these events in detail, examining their causes, consequences, and lasting effects on Iran and the world. Khomeini's early life and background played a crucial role in shaping his ideological perspective. Born in 1902 in the town of Khomeini, Khomeini was raised in a religious household and received a traditional Islamic education. His formative years were spent studying Islamic jurisprudence, philosophy, and mysticism, leading him to become a prominent religious scholar. Khomeini's early experiences with the political repression of the Pahlavi regime influenced his eventual opposition to the Shah. The growing westernization and secularization of Iran under the Shah's rule created a deep sense of disillusionment among religious leaders and traditionalists, including Khomeini, who viewed these changes as threats to the Islamic way of life. In the 1960s, Khomeini emerged as a vocal critic of the Shah's regime, particularly after the introduction of the White Revolution in 1963. This program aimed to modernize and reform Iran's economy and society, but was met with resistance from traditionalists and religious leaders. Khomeini's opposition intensified after his arrest in 1963 for criticizing the Shah, leading to widespread protests and riots across the country. His subsequent exile to Iraq in 1964 marked a significant turning point in his life. From Iraq, Khomeini continued to write and communicate with his followers, expanding his influence beyond Iran's borders. During this time, he developed his political philosophy, advocating for the establishment of an Islamic government based on the principles of Shia Islam. The late 1970s marked a critical juncture in Iran's history as public discontent with the Shah reached a boiling point. Economic mismanagement, political repression, and social inequality fueled widespread protests against the regime. Various factions, including leftists, nationalists, and religious groups, united in their opposition to the Shah, but it was Khomeini who emerged as the unifying figure. His ability to articulate the grievances of the Iranian people resonated with the masses, leading to the formation of a broad-based coalition against the Shah. As protests intensified, Khomeini's messages spread like wildfire, galvanizing support for the revolution. In January 1979, the Shah fled Iran, marking a monumental shift in the political landscape. Khomeini returned from exile to a hero's welcome, greeted by millions who viewed him as the savior of the nation. His return signified not only the end of the monarchy, but also the beginning of a new era in which Islamic principles would guide governance. The establishment of the Islamic Republic soon followed, with Khomeini positioned as the supreme leader. This new political structure combined religious authority with political power, embodying Khomeini's vision of governance rooted in Islamic law. One of the most significant events during Khomeini's rise to power was the adoption of the 1979 Constitution, which enshrined the principles of Vilayat-e-Faqih, or the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. This concept positioned Khomeini as the ultimate authority in Iran, merging religious and political power in a way that had not been seen before. The new government sought to implement Islamic law, fundamentally transforming Iranian society. Khomeini's supporters quickly moved to consolidate control, sidelining competing factions that had initially united against the Shah. The Revolutionary Guards were established to protect the revolution and its ideals, further illustrating the intertwining of religion and politics. The Islamic Republic faced immediate challenges as it sought to establish its legitimacy and consolidate power. One of the most significant conflicts emerged in the form of the Iran hostage crisis in November 1979, when Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage. This event not only heightened tensions between the United States and Iran, but also played a crucial role in shaping Khomeini's regime. The motivations behind the hostage crisis were rooted in the deep-seated resentment towards U.S. support for the Shah and the perceived interference of foreign powers in Iran's internal affairs. Khomeini's endorsement of the hostage crisis rallied public support, framing it as a defense of Iranian sovereignty against Western imperialism. The crisis lasted for 444 days, becoming a defining moment in U.S.-Iran relations and influencing American domestic politics, particularly during the 1980 presidential election. For Khomeini, the crisis solidified his position as a leader who stood up to foreign aggression, allowing him to strengthen his grip on power while simultaneously isolating Iran from the West. The prolonged hostage situation would have lasting repercussions, entrenching anti-American sentiment within Iranian society and shaping the narrative of resistance against Western influence. As Khomeini consolidated power domestically, he also faced external challenges. In September 1980, Iraq, led by President Saddam Hussein, invaded Iran, initiating the Iran-Iraq War. The war was fueled by a mix of territorial disputes, regional rivalries, and Khomeini's revolutionary ideology, which posed a threat to Iraq's secular Ba'athist regime. Khomeini framed the war as a holy struggle against foreign aggression, successfully mobilizing the Iranian population to support the war effort. The Revolutionary Guards and regular military forces were called upon to defend the nation, with Khomeini invoking the concept of martyrdom to inspire sacrifice among the populace. The Iran-Iraq War would become one of the longest and deadliest conflicts of the 20th century, lasting until 1988. The war claimed hundreds of thousands of lives and caused immense suffering on both sides, with widespread devastation and economic hardship. Khomeini's steadfast commitment to the war was rooted in his belief that conceding to Iraq would undermine the revolution and jeopardize Iran's sovereignty. Despite the staggering costs, Khomeini's rhetoric framed the conflict as a test of faith and resolve, cultivating a culture of sacrifice and martyrdom within Iranian society. As the war progressed, the economic toll on Iran became increasingly apparent. Sanctions, international isolation, and military expenditures strained the economy, leading to widespread discontent among the populace. Khomeini's government struggled to manage the economic crisis, and frustrations began to mount as the public faced shortages, inflation, and a declining standard of living. However, Khomeini maintained a firm grip on power, employing censorship and repression to stifle dissent. The regime's focus on ideological purity often overshadowed the pressing needs of the people, leading to further alienation. In the backdrop of the war, Khomeini's regime also grappled with internal divisions. While the initial unity against the Shah had been forged through a shared goal, the consolidation of power by Khomeini and his followers marginalized competing factions within the revolutionary movement. Leftist groups, nationalists, and moderates found themselves increasingly sidelined, leading to political purges and crackdowns on dissent. The 1981 assassination of President Mohammad Ali Rajai and Prime Minister Mohammad Javad Bey Honar by leftist opposition groups illustrated the volatility of the political climate. Khomeini's response was swift and brutal, as the government intensified efforts to root out opposition, often employing violence and intimidation to maintain control. Despite the challenges faced by Khomeini's regime, the Iranian government sought to promote its revolutionary ideology beyond its borders. Khomeini's leadership influenced various movements and groups across the Middle East, particularly in Lebanon, where Iran provided support to Hezbollah. This alignment with militant groups reflected Khomeini's vision of exporting the Islamic Revolution and promoting anti-Western sentiments. Khomeini's foreign policy was characterized by a commitment to Islamic solidarity and a rejection of Western hegemony, leading to further isolation from many nations. The conclusion of the Iran-Iraq War in 1988 marked a significant turning point for Khomeini and the Islamic Republic. While Iran emerged victorious in its defense against Iraq, the war left a deep scar on the nation, with immense loss of life and economic destruction. The ceasefire brokered by the United Nations highlighted the immense costs of the conflict and exposed the vulnerabilities of Khomeini's leadership. In his final years, Khomeini's health deteriorated, and he faced increasing challenges in maintaining the ideological fervor that had defined the revolution. Khomeini's death in June 1989 signaled the end of an era for Iran. His passing prompted a re-evaluation of his legacy, with both reverence and controversy shaping the narratives surrounding his life and leadership. The principles he championed, particularly the concept of vilayat-e-faqih, remained central to the governance of the Islamic Republic. However, his successors faced significant challenges as they navigated the complex political landscape left in the wake of his leadership. The aftermath of Khomeini's death saw a power struggle among various factions within the regime, with reformists and conservatives vying for influence. The political dynamics of the Islamic Republic evolved, reflecting the changing expectations of the Iranian populace. While Khomeini had succeeded in establishing an Islamic Republic, the challenges of governance and the need for reform became increasingly apparent. His legacy continued to resonate in Iranian politics, influencing the direction of the Islamic Republic for years to come. In examining the major events and conflicts that defined Khomeini's leadership, it is clear that his impact extended far beyond Iran's borders. The consequences of the Iranian Revolution and Khomeini's policies shaped regional dynamics, influenced global politics, and left a lasting imprint on the discourse surrounding Islam and governance. The intertwining of religion and politics in Khomeini's vision set a precedent that continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about the role of Islam in governance and the relationship between state and religion. Khomeini's leadership was characterized by a combination of ideological fervor, political acumen, and a willingness to confront external and internal challenges. His ability to articulate the aspirations of the Iranian people and frame them within an Islamic context allowed him to unite diverse factions against the Shah. The events that transpired during his rise to prominence and the conflicts that defined his leadership were not only pivotal for Iran, but also shaped the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. As the Islamic Republic continues to navigate the post-Khomeini era, the implications of his leadership remain a crucial part of understanding contemporary Iranian society and its role in global affairs. Khomeini's legacy is a complex tapestry of achievements and challenges, reflecting the enduring tensions between tradition and modernity, faith and governance, and the aspirations of a people striving for self-determination in a rapidly changing world. The conflicts that arose during his leadership serve as a reminder of the enduring struggles faced by nations grappling with questions of identity, sovereignty, and the interplay between religion and politics. The narrative of Khomeini's leadership remains relevant, offering insights into the ongoing challenges and aspirations of the Iranian people as they navigate their path in an increasingly interconnected world. The climax of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's leadership during the Iranian Revolution and the subsequent establishment of the Islamic Republic represents a pivotal moment, not only in Iranian history, but also in the broader geopolitical landscape. This phase is characterized by intense political turmoil, revolutionary fervor, and the consolidation of Khomeini's power as he transitioned from a revolutionary leader to the supreme leader of Iran. The climax can be understood through a series of interconnected events, ideological battles, and conflicts that define this transformative period. At the heart of the climax is the period surrounding the overthrow of the Pahlavi monarchy, culminating in the Shah's departure in January 1979. The revolution was driven by widespread discontent with the Shah's regime, which was marked by authoritarianism, corruption, and the rapid westernization of Iranian society. Khomeini emerged as a unifying figure, rallying various factions, including secular nationalists, leftists, and religious groups, against the common enemy. His ability to articulate the grievances of the people and frame the revolution in Islamic terms allowed him to galvanize mass support. As protests escalated in the late 1970s, the political landscape in Iran became increasingly polarized. The Shah attempted to quell dissent through violent repression, leading to further unrest and radicalization among opposition groups. The pivotal moment came on January 16, 1979, when the Shah left Iran, ostensibly for medical treatment. This departure marked a turning point, as it removed the figurehead of the regime and ignited hopes for a new political order. Khomeini's return from exile on February 1, 1979, was a monumental event that captured the imagination of the Iranian populace. Millions thronged the streets of Tehran to welcome him, viewing him as the savior of the nation. His arrival signaled not only the end of the monarchy, but also the beginning of a new era defined by Islamic governance. Khomeini's speeches during this period emphasized themes of justice, equality, and the need for an Islamic state based on the principles of Shia Islam. His charisma and political acumen enabled him to unite a diverse coalition of revolutionaries, each with their own agendas, under the banner of an Islamic Republic. Following the Shah's departure, the power vacuum created a chaotic political environment. Various factions within the revolutionary movement began to vie for control, and Khomeini's leadership was instrumental in navigating these challenges. He advocated for the establishment of a provisional government, which included members from various political backgrounds. However, tensions soon emerged as ideological differences became apparent. Leftist factions, secular nationalists, and religious groups each sought to shape the new government according to their visions, leading to a fracturing of the revolutionary coalition. The establishment of the Islamic Republic was formalized with the 1979 referendum, in which an overwhelming majority of Iranians voted in favor of replacing the monarchy with an Islamic government. This event solidified Khomeini's position as the supreme leader, granting him unparalleled authority. His vision for the Islamic Republic was rooted in the concept of Vilayat-e-Faqih, which positioned the clergy as the ultimate authority in governance. This doctrine was not merely a political maneuver. It reflected Khomeini's belief that Islamic principles should guide all aspects of life, including law, education, and social norms. However, the transition to an Islamic Republic was fraught with challenges. The immediate aftermath of the revolution saw the government grappling with the need to address pressing issues such as economic instability, political factionalism, and social unrest. Khomeini's administration faced significant criticism as the realities of governance set in. Economic discontent began to surface as inflation, unemployment, and shortages plagued the populace. The revolutionary fervor that had once united the people began to dissipate as expectations clashed with the realities of governance. The consolidation of power by Khomeini and his followers came at a cost. The new regime moved swiftly to eliminate opposition, particularly targeting leftist groups and secular nationalists who were seen as threats to the revolutionary ideals. The Revolutionary Guards, established to protect the revolution, became instrumental in enforcing ideological conformity and suppressing dissent. Political purges ensued, leading to the imprisonment and execution of thousands of individuals who opposed the new regime. This period of repression sowed seeds of division within Iranian society and created an atmosphere of fear. The climax of Khomeini's leadership was further complicated by external pressures, particularly from the United States. The U.S. had long supported the Shah's regime, and the revolution raised concerns about the stability of the region. The culmination of these tensions resulted in the Iran hostage crisis, which began on November 4, 1979, when Iranian students seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran and took 52 American hostages. The hostage crisis became a defining moment in U.S.-Iran relations and further entrenched Khomeini's position as a leader who stood up to foreign imperialism. Khomeini's endorsement of the hostage crisis galvanized public support, framing it as a struggle for national dignity and sovereignty. The crisis not only solidified Khomeini's power domestically, but also shaped Iran's international relations for decades to come. The United States imposed sanctions on Iran, leading to further isolation and entrenching anti-American sentiment within Iranian society. The hostage crisis became a rallying point for Khomeini, reinforcing his narrative of resistance against Western influence and portraying the U.S. as the enemy of the revolution. The Iran-Iraq War, which erupted in September 1980, marked another critical phase of Khomeini's leadership and the climax of the Islamic Republic's early years. The war was rooted in a complex interplay of territorial disputes, regional rivalries, and Khomeini's revolutionary ideology. Iraqi President Saddam Hussein sought to exploit Iran's political turmoil, launching a surprise invasion that aimed to capitalize on perceived vulnerabilities. Khomeini's response to the war was shaped by a deep commitment to defending the revolution and the Islamic Republic. He framed the conflict as a holy struggle against foreign aggression, rallying the Iranian populace to support the war effort. The Revolutionary Guards and regular military forces were mobilized, and Khomeini called upon the nation to make sacrifices for the defense of Islam and Iran. His rhetoric emphasized themes of martyrdom, sacrifice, and resistance, fostering a culture of resilience within Iranian society. The Iran-Iraq War would become one of the longest and bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century, lasting until 1988. The war claimed hundreds of thousands of lives and resulted in widespread devastation on both sides. Khomeini's steadfast commitment to the war was rooted in his belief that conceding to Iraq would undermine the revolution and jeopardize Iran's sovereignty. The regime's propaganda portrayed the conflict as a struggle for survival, reinforcing the idea that the revolution was under siege from both internal and external enemies. Despite the immense toll of the war, Khomeini maintained a firm grip on power. The regime employed censorship, repression, and violence to stifle dissent, ensuring that opposition voices were silenced. However, the economic hardships brought about by the war created discontent among the populace. Inflation, food shortages, and economic mismanagement led to protests and strikes, challenging the legitimacy of Khomeini's leadership. As the war progressed, Khomeini faced increasing pressure to negotiate a ceasefire. The conflict had drained resources, caused immense suffering, and left Iran economically devastated. The war's end in 1988, mediated by the United Nations, marked a significant turning point for Khomeini and the Islamic Republic. While Iran emerged victorious in its defense against Iraq, the war left a profound impact on the nation, shaping the trajectory of Khomeini's legacy and the future of the Islamic Republic. In the wake of the war, Khomeini's health began to deteriorate, and he faced challenges in maintaining the ideological fervor that had defined the revolution. His final years were marked by a struggle to balance the revolutionary ideals with the pressing needs of governance. The economic hardships and internal divisions within the regime highlighted the complexities of ruling a nation shaped by revolutionary fervor. Khomeini's death on June 3, 1989, marked the conclusion of a significant chapter in Iranian history. His passing prompted a re-evaluation of his legacy, with both reverence and controversy shaping the narratives surrounding his life and leadership. The principles he championed, particularly the concept of velayat-e-faqih, remained central to the governance of the Islamic Republic. However, his successors faced significant challenges as they navigated the political landscape left in the wake of his leadership. The climax of Khomeini's leadership encapsulates a period of intense revolutionary fervor, ideological battles, and conflicts that shaped the trajectory of Iran and its role in the world. The events surrounding the overthrow of the Pahlavi regime, the establishment of the Islamic Republic, and the Iran-Iraq War defined this transformative phase, illustrating Khomeini's ability to navigate challenges while consolidating power. As the Islamic Republic continues to grapple with the legacy of Khomeini's leadership, the climax of his rule remains a crucial part of understanding contemporary Iranian society and its role in global affairs. Khomeini's vision of governance, rooted in Islamic principles, continues to influence Iranian politics and the aspirations of its people as they navigate their path in an increasingly interconnected world. The events of Khomeini's climax in leadership underscore the complexities of revolution, governance, and the interplay between ideology and reality. The challenges faced by the Islamic Republic in the aftermath of the revolution serve as a reminder of the enduring struggles faced by nations grappling with questions of identity, sovereignty, and the relationship between religion and politics. Khomeini's legacy, shaped by the triumphs and challenges of his leadership, continues to resonate in the ongoing discourse surrounding the role of Islam in governance and the future of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The resolution and decline of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's influence and the Islamic Republic of Iran represent a significant chapter in the country's history, marked by complex socio-political dynamics, economic challenges, and evolving public sentiments. Following the Islamic Revolution in 1979, which saw Khomeini rise to power as the supreme leader, Iran underwent transformative changes. However, the aftermath of the revolution and Khomeini's eventual death in 1989 led to a re-evaluation of his legacy and the ideological foundations of the Islamic Republic. This period of decline can be examined through various lenses, including the internal contradictions within the regime, the economic hardships that followed the Iran-Iraq War, and the changing social landscape in Iran. In the years immediately following the Iranian Revolution, Khomeini was a figure of immense influence, revered by many as a revolutionary leader who championed the cause of justice and Islamic governance. The initial enthusiasm for the revolution and Khomeini's vision of an Islamic Republic was rooted in a desire for social justice, independence from foreign intervention, and the establishment of a government that reflected Islamic principles. However, the realities of governance began to present challenges that exposed the vulnerabilities of the regime and its ideological underpinnings. The Iran-Iraq War, which lasted from 1980 to 1988, was a pivotal moment for the Islamic Republic. While Khomeini's leadership was credited with mobilizing the nation to resist Saddam Hussein's aggression, the war resulted in staggering casualties, economic devastation, and widespread disillusionment among the populace. The regime's reliance on a culture of martyrdom and sacrifice, initially a rallying point for support, began to wane as the war dragged on and the human cost became increasingly unbearable. Many Iranians, who had initially viewed Khomeini as a champion of their cause, began to question the effectiveness of the leadership in addressing the war's ramifications. As the war concluded, the Islamic Republic faced the monumental task of rebuilding a shattered economy. Khomeini's vision of a self-sufficient Islamic state was challenged by the realities of a nation in ruins, struggling with hyperinflation, unemployment, and a lack of basic goods. The economic hardships led to widespread dissatisfaction, and protests erupted across the country as citizens voiced their frustrations. Many began to perceive the ruling elite as disconnected from the struggles faced by ordinary Iranians. The government's inability to provide tangible improvements in living conditions fueled a sense of betrayal among those who had placed their hopes in the revolution. The internal dynamics within the Islamic Republic also contributed to the decline of Khomeini's influence. Initially, the revolution had united various factions, including leftists, secular nationalists, and religious conservatives, under a common banner against the Shah. However, as the complexities of governance emerged, these diverse groups began to fracture. Khomeini's leadership style, characterized by a concentration of power among the clerical elite, alienated many who had hoped for a more inclusive political landscape. As the revolutionary coalition disintegrated, rival factions began to vie for control, leading to internal conflicts that weakened the regime's stability. The economic and social crises were compounded by the ideological rigidity of the regime. Khomeini had envisioned a society governed by Islamic law and principles, yet the practicalities of governance required a degree of flexibility that was often met with resistance from conservative elements within the regime. The tensions between reformists advocating for greater political freedoms and conservatives defending the revolutionary ideals created a volatile political climate. This ideological struggle manifested itself in various forms, including crackdowns on dissent, censorship of the press, and repression of political opponents, all of which further alienated segments of the population. Khomeini's death in 1989 marked a critical juncture in the Islamic Republic's history. His passing not only left a leadership void but also initiated a period of uncertainty regarding the future direction of the regime. The succession to Khomeini's position as supreme leader fell to Ali Khamenei, who faced the daunting challenge of maintaining the revolutionary ideals while navigating the realities of a changing political landscape. The transition in leadership also raised questions about the continuity of Khomeini's legacy and the extent to which his vision would be upheld. In the wake of Khomeini's death, the new leadership attempted to present itself as the legitimate successor to his revolutionary legacy. However, Khamenei's ascension was met with skepticism from various factions within the regime, and the internal power struggles intensified. The struggle for power among clerics, former revolutionaries, and technocrats highlighted the fractures within the regime and the challenges of presenting a unified front to the public. Khamenei's approach to governance, which emphasized maintaining the principles of Vilayat-e-Faqih while also addressing the pressing economic issues, reflected the complexity of leading a nation grappling with the consequences of Khomeini's policies. The 1990s brought about a period of economic reform and relative political liberalization under President Mohammad Khatami, who was elected in 1997. Khatami's presidency marked a departure from the conservative policies of his predecessors, advocating for civil society, political reform, and greater freedoms for the Iranian people. His election was seen as a response to the widespread discontent with the status quo, particularly among the youth who had come of age during the revolution. Khatami's reforms generated hope for a more democratic political environment, yet they were met with fierce resistance from conservative factions that viewed any deviation from Khomeini's original vision as a threat to the Islamic Republic. Despite Khatami's attempts to implement reforms, the conservative establishment, including the Guardian Council and other key institutions, maintained significant control over the political process. The balance of power between reformists and conservatives created an environment of tension and conflict, leading to a series of political crises that revealed the fragility of the Islamic Republic's foundations. The failure of Khatami's reformist agenda to bring about meaningful change resulted in growing disillusionment among his supporters, many of whom became increasingly frustrated with the regime's inability to deliver on its promises. As the new millennium approached, Iran faced additional challenges on the international stage. The post-9/11 geopolitical landscape reshaped Iran's relationship with the West, particularly with the United States. Accusations of Iran's support for terrorism and its nuclear ambitions further isolated the regime, leading to a series of economic sanctions that exacerbated the already dire economic situation. The impact of these sanctions was felt acutely by the Iranian populace, fueling public discontent and disillusionment with the government. The erosion of Khomeini's ideals was further underscored by the regime's failure to address the fundamental issues facing the nation. The Arab Spring in 2011 served as a reminder of the fragility of authoritarian regimes across the Middle East and sparked discussions about the possibility of similar movements in Iran. While the Iranian government successfully quelled any immediate threats to its rule, the underlying dissatisfaction among the populace persisted. The government's heavy-handed response to dissent and its reliance on security forces to maintain order further alienated citizens and contributed to a growing sense of disillusionment. As the Islamic Republic entered its fourth decade, the legacy of Khomeini faced increasing scrutiny. While Khomeini had once been viewed as a heroic figure who liberated Iran from tyranny, his image began to shift as the realities of governance and the impact of his policies became clearer. The idealistic promises of the revolution, such as social justice, economic independence, and cultural renaissance, had been overshadowed by political repression, economic hardship, and social stagnation. The social landscape in Iran also underwent significant transformations, particularly among the youth. The post-revolutionary generation, which had not experienced the revolution firsthand, began to challenge the existing norms and values imposed by the regime. The rise of social media and the internet facilitated the exchange of ideas and information, creating a platform for dissent and activism. Young Iranians increasingly sought greater freedoms and opportunities, reflecting a desire for a more open and democratic society. The 2009 presidential election, which resulted in widespread protests against alleged electoral fraud, served as a watershed moment in contemporary Iranian history. The Green Movement, which emerged in response to the disputed election, galvanized a broad cross-section of society, including students, intellectuals, and urban professionals. The protests, which were met with violent repression by the government, revealed the deep-seated frustrations with the regime and its inability to respond to the aspirations of the people. The events of 2009 underscored the disconnect between the ruling elite and the citizenry, highlighting the challenges faced by the Islamic Republic in maintaining its legitimacy. The subsequent years saw an increasing polarization within Iranian society as debates over the future direction of the country intensified. While some segments of the population continued to support reformist movements and advocate for political change, others remained loyal to the conservative establishment, fearing that any deviation from the Islamic Republic's founding principles would lead to chaos and instability. This ideological divide contributed to a climate of tension and uncertainty as the regime struggled to reconcile its revolutionary ideals with the aspirations of a population demanding greater freedoms and rights. In the latter half of the 2010s, the economic situation in Iran further deteriorated, particularly following the re-imposition of stringent sanctions by the United States under President Donald Trump. The combination of internal mismanagement and external pressures exacerbated the economic crisis, leading to skyrocketing inflation, high unemployment rates, and widespread poverty. The Iranian public's frustration with the regime intensified, culminating in protests across the country in late 2017 and late 2019, driven by economic grievances and calls for political change. The resolution and decline of Khomeini's influence must also be understood in the context of the broader geopolitical landscape in the Middle East. The Islamic Republic's support for regional proxy groups, its role in conflicts such as the Syrian civil war, and its contentious relationships with neighboring countries and global powers contributed to the complex dynamics surrounding Iran. The regime's foreign policy decisions often reflected a defensive posture, seeking to maintain its influence and resist external pressures, but these actions also came at a significant cost to its domestic stability and legitimacy. In the wake of the 2020 assassination of Qasem Soleimani, a key figure in Iran's military and political apparatus, the regime faced additional challenges in navigating its response to external threats while addressing domestic discontent. The regime's reliance on a narrative of resistance against foreign adversaries became increasingly strained as the economic hardships continued to mount, and calls for accountability from within society grew louder. As the Islamic Republic moved into the 2020s, the decline of Khomeini's influence was evident in the evolving public sentiment and the questioning of the regime's legitimacy. The ideals that had once inspired the revolution were increasingly juxtaposed with the realities of life under the Islamic Republic, leading to a re-evaluation of Khomeini's legacy. While Khomeini had envisioned a government that would uplift the people and restore dignity to the nation, the long-standing struggles of ordinary Iranians painted a contrasting picture. The legacy and impact of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini are profound and far-reaching. shaping the trajectory of Iran and influencing global political dynamics long after his death. As the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Khomeini's vision transformed a nation, intertwining religious authority with governance and creating a unique political framework that would leave an indelible mark on the world stage. His ideas, particularly the concept of Vilayat-e-Faqih, or the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, laid the foundation for a political system where religious leaders hold significant authority over state affairs, redefining the relationship between religion and politics not only in Iran but also in the wider Muslim world. Khomeini's ideological framework emerged in response to the socio-political conditions of Iran during the 20th century. The oppressive rule of the Pahlavi dynasty, characterized by westernization and authoritarianism, generated widespread discontent among various segments of society. Khomeini's critique of the Shah's regime resonated with the populace, as he emphasized themes of anti-imperialism, social justice, and the need for an Islamic state. His ability to articulate a vision of governance grounded in Islamic principles galvanized a broad coalition of support, from traditional religious scholars to leftist activists. This coalition culminated in the Islamic Revolution of 1979, which saw the overthrow of the Shah and the establishment of an Islamic Republic. Khomeini's leadership during the revolution marked a pivotal moment in Iranian history, as it not only ended monarchical rule but also initiated a radical restructuring of Iranian society. The revolution sought to create an Islamic state that aligned with the values of the Quran and Shia Islam, replacing secular institutions with religious authority. Khomeini's vision of Vilayat-e-Faqih became central to the new political order, positing that the Islamic jurist is the rightful guardian of the community, responsible for interpreting Islamic law and ensuring the welfare of the people. This ideological shift fundamentally altered the nature of governance in Iran, establishing a model that emphasized religious legitimacy as the basis for political authority. The impact of Khomeini's ideology extended beyond Iran's borders, inspiring a wave of Islamic movements across the region and beyond. His revolutionary rhetoric and anti-imperialist stance resonated with oppressed populations in various countries, prompting them to challenge existing political structures and seek empowerment through Islamic identity. Khomeini's success in mobilizing the masses against Western-backed authoritarian regimes served as a powerful example of how religious ideology could be harnessed for political change. Movements in places like Lebanon, Palestine, and even as far as Afghanistan found inspiration in Khomeini's model, leading to a resurgence of political Islam that challenged secular governance models prevalent in the region. However, Khomeini's legacy is also marked by significant contradictions. While he is celebrated for advocating anti-imperialism and social justice, his regime's authoritarian tendencies raised questions about the nature of freedom and democracy within the Islamic Republic. The consolidation of power among the clerical elite resulted in the suppression of political dissent, with opposition parties and civil society organizations facing severe restrictions. Khomeini's vision of an Islamic society was often at odds with individual freedoms, leading to widespread human rights abuses. The revolutionary fervor that once united various factions began to wane as the realities of governance set in, leaving many disillusioned with the regime's practices. Khomeini's foreign policy also had significant implications for Iran's legacy. His staunch anti-Americanism, rooted in a belief that the U.S. was a source of imperialism and oppression, shaped Iranian foreign relations for decades. The severing of diplomatic ties with the United States following the revolution marked the beginning of a protracted period of hostility, characterized by economic sanctions and military confrontations. Khomeini's call for the exportation of the revolution and support for Islamist movements across the region positioned Iran as a key player in Middle Eastern geopolitics, often in opposition to U.S. interests. This rivalry has influenced regional dynamics, contributing to ongoing conflicts and tensions that continue to this day. The social impact of Khomeini's policies has also been profound, particularly regarding gender roles and family life in Iran. While Khomeini aimed to promote Islamic values, many of his policies resulted in significant restrictions on women's rights and personal freedoms. The imposition of a strict dress code and the enforcement of conservative social norms reflected a desire to mold Iranian society according to specific interpretations of Islam. While Khomeini's regime sought to elevate the status of women in certain areas, such as education and participation in the workforce, these advancements were often overshadowed by the restrictions placed on their freedoms. This legacy of gendered politics has had lasting implications, shaping the ongoing struggles for women's rights and social justice in contemporary Iran. Khomeini's impact on Iranian culture and identity has also been significant. His emphasis on Islamic values reshaped cultural norms, influencing literature, art, and education. The revolutionary government promoted a narrative that framed the struggle for independence as a religious duty, fostering a sense of national pride rooted in Islamic identity. Khomeini's writings, speeches, and teachings became integral to the educational curriculum, instilling a sense of loyalty to the ideals of the revolution among younger generations. However, this emphasis on Islamic identity has also led to tensions between traditional values and modernity, as younger Iranians navigate a complex landscape of cultural expectations and aspirations for personal freedom. Despite the passage of time since Khomeini's death in 1989, his legacy continues to shape contemporary Iran and its politics. The post-revolutionary generation, which has not experienced the revolution firsthand, is increasingly critical of the regime's adherence to Khomeini's ideals. The rise of youth activism and demands for greater freedoms reflect a departure from the revolutionary fervor that characterized earlier decades. This generational shift poses challenges for the Islamic Republic as it grapples with the aspirations of a population seeking change in the face of economic hardship and political repression. Furthermore, Khomeini's legacy has implications for the broader Islamic world. His vision of political Islam has been embraced and adapted by various movements, both moderate and radical. While some groups advocate for democratic reforms within an Islamic framework, others have taken a more militant approach, leading to a complex landscape of Islamist movements that vary in ideology and tactics. Khomeini's influence on political Islam has led to ongoing debates about the role of religion in governance, as well as the potential for democratic practices within Islamic frameworks. The conclusion of any comprehensive examination of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's life, his rise to power, the establishment of the Islamic Republic, and his lasting impact on both Iran and the wider world must encapsulate the central themes and complexities inherent in his legacy. Khomeini's influence as a revolutionary leader cannot be overstated. He was a pivotal figure in the overthrow of the Pahlavi monarchy, catalyzing profound changes that reshaped Iranian society and governance. His vision for an Islamic state, guided by the principles of Shia Islam and the doctrine of Vilayat-e-Faqih, established a new political paradigm that intertwined religious authority with state power. This development fundamentally altered the course of Iranian history and has continued to resonate in the political landscape of the Middle East. Khomeini's ascent to prominence was not solely a political maneuver. It was deeply intertwined with a broader social movement that resonated with diverse segments of Iranian society. His ability to unite various factions under a common goal, resisting Western imperialism and establishing an Islamic framework for governance, was a remarkable feat. However, the ideological underpinnings of Khomeini's regime also introduced significant contradictions. While he championed anti-imperialist sentiments and sought social justice, his administration often resorted to authoritarian practices, suppressing dissent and curbing personal freedoms. The tension between Khomeini's revolutionary ideals and the realities of governance remains a critical aspect of his legacy, prompting ongoing debates about the nature of democracy and human rights within the Islamic Republic. Khomeini's impact extended beyond Iran's borders, inspiring a wave of Islamic movements worldwide. His revolutionary rhetoric and model of governance resonated with various groups seeking empowerment through Islamic identity. While many embraced Khomeini's vision as a legitimate path towards social and political change, others have taken more radical interpretations, leading to the rise of various Islamist movements that challenge secular governance. The ramifications of Khomeini's ideology continue to influence contemporary political dynamics, as nations grapple with the balance between religious identity and modern governance. Moreover, the social implications of Khomeini's policies have had lasting effects on Iranian culture and gender dynamics. His administration aimed to instill Islamic values in everyday life, affecting education, media, and public behavior. While Khomeini's vision led to some advancements, particularly in education and women's participation in the workforce, the imposition of strict social norms often contradicted the pursuit of individual rights and freedoms. This legacy has fostered ongoing struggles for gender equality and personal liberties in Iran, as new generations navigate the complexities of cultural expectations and aspirations for change. The evolution of Iranian society since Khomeini's time also reflects a broader shift in public sentiment. The post-revolutionary generation, distanced from the revolutionary fervor that characterized the early years of the Islamic Republic, increasingly questions the regime's adherence to Khomeini's principles. The rise of youth activism, coupled with demands for greater freedoms and economic opportunities, highlights a disconnect between the aspirations of contemporary Iranians and the rigid structures established by Khomeini's ideology. This generational shift poses significant challenges for the Islamic Republic as it confronts the realities of a rapidly changing society. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's legacy is a multifaceted tapestry woven with threads of revolutionary fervor, ideological ambition, and enduring contradictions. While he is celebrated by many as a champion of anti-imperialism and an architect of the Islamic Republic, his regime's authoritarian practices and limitations on personal freedoms complicate the narrative of his impact. As Iran continues to navigate its complex socio-political landscape, the implications of Khomeini's ideology remain at the forefront of national discourse, shaping debates on governance, identity, and the future of the Islamic Republic. Ultimately, Khomeini's legacy serves as both a source of inspiration and a cautionary tale, reflecting the intricate interplay between faith, politics, and the aspirations of a people seeking justice and autonomy in a rapidly evolving world.